Tawfiq Abdul Latif was sexually abused at a reform school as a youth, and now he's looking for justice. He said, Glenn Mills was supposed to help me, and now I have emotional breakdowns and generally feel like a failure in life. At my law firm, we work with abuse victims, and this is in large part based on my own story, being somebody who had my own struggle, in my case, drug addiction. I know how hard it is to work up the courage to ask for help, especially when we feel trapped, like there's absolutely no way out. But abusers can be brought to justice. They can be punished, even if the abuse happened a long time ago. This was the case in Glenn Mills, and let me bring you up to speed about how this reform school has been sued so often and for so much money that they're currently declaring bankruptcy. Funny enough, I grew up right near Glenn Mills School. I remember playing them in sports. What was crazy is I knew it was a school for kids that had issues, like they had criminal problems or otherwise were in juvenile detention. But yet when we played them on the football field or on the wrestling mat or on the baseball field, the children were so well disciplined. All the parents at the games would comment about how well behaved they were and how this reform school must be doing their job. And the school was meant to teach them discipline and life skills. Over the years, Glenn Mills had earned the reputation of being akin to the Harvard of reform schools in the United States. It was an alternative to prison, and a lot of people on the outside, they thought really highly of this particular reform school. In fact, here's a quote from a judge in a 48-hour segment.
Glenn Mills is, to me, a lifesaver for a lot of these kids. The kids go to school, the kids are influenced by peer correction, peer review. The kids have an opportunity to feel safe. Glenn Mills changes value systems.
Despite all the accolades Glenn Mills received from the outside, victims reported quite a different story. Nancy Winkler, an attorney that my law firm is working with on the case, was quoted in the Inquirer as saying, "The facade outside was a stark contrast to life inside the walls. Glenn Mills was a house of horrors." LeBoy Wiggins, a former student at Glenn Mills, said the abuse was so bad that he ran away after 6 months. He said, "I went there to become a better person. I went there to become rehabilitated. I left Glenn Mills 1,000 times worse than before I came. 1,000 times worse." CBS News also reported that school officials, well, they were incentivized to cover up the abuse so they didn't lose any of their funding. This makes sense when you take into account the Philadelphia Inquirer's report that Glenn Mills received $52,000 per student. This equates to over $40 million in taxpayer funding per year. But if the abuse happened years or even decades ago, how are the survivors now able to get justice? Well, here's the thing. When some people think about the legal system, they think of Law and Order and other legal dramas on TV. In most of these instances, the dramas are showing criminal cases where the prosecutor must show beyond a reasonable doubt that the perpetrator is guilty of the crime. In the United States, the bar for proving somebody's guilty of a crime is high for a reason. We as a society assume that you are innocent until you're proven guilty. When victims of sexual assault think about how can they get justice, they likely think, I can't prove this. This person won't be criminally convicted. And that's what many of my clients who were at Glenn Mills thought. They thought that nobody would believe them, that they didn't have the evidence to prove that this happened. And in many instances, my clients were raised in a culture that was against snitching.
The school has 5 basic rules.
This is for what everybody. This is based on. This
at
is,
all times.
At all times. No one has the right to hurt another person. We will never behave in any way that will discredit ourselves or our unit or school.
But what my clients didn't know is that our legal system has a separate remedy for holding facilities and institutions accountable, and that's the civil justice system. The fundamental difference is that a criminal case involves a crime against the state. You'll notice when somebody's charged with a crime, it's often Pennsylvania versus and then their name as a defendant. With a civil case, it's actually between two private parties where what you're suing for is monetary damages. Nobody's going to jail. While criminal cases require proving somebody is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, civil cases just require that you show by the preponderance of the evidence, or by 51%, that somebody was negligent or somebody should be held accountable for the harm that you suffered. I see this most often at my law firm when it comes to car accident cases and general personal injury matters. We might not always have video footage that shows the other driver ran the red light, but what we do is piece together a civil case. We say, okay, this is where the damage is to the car, which likely leads you to believe that it was hit at this angle, which means they must have read the light. And we go to the court and a jury of our peers say, we don't know this for sure, but we believe that this person, they're 51% at fault. And what they award is financial compensation for the wrong that occurred. That's exactly what's happening with Glen Mills. Hundreds or even thousands of former students at Glen Mills have now come forward with allegations of abuse. While this case is still ongoing and hasn't yet reached a conclusion, you don't need to wait till it's over to act. If you were there and suffered some type of abuse, you're better off coming forward now. If someone you love has been a victim of sexual abuse, either at Glen Mills or another facility, please, I ask you to share this video with them and encourage them to come forward. And if you want to learn more about how you can help victims of sexual abuse, click on the video that just popped on the screen. Thank you.